Last Thursday night, the president reportedly ordered a strategic airstrike on Iran, and then he pulled back at the last second. And, of course, that creates a lot of opportunity for a lot of opinions to fly back and forth on his mental toughness, if you will. Well, with us this morning, former U.S. Marine and an expert in the fields of mental toughness and emotional intelligence, WRHI is here to talk about what it means to be in the middle of making big decisions with so much background noise. Good morning, Eric.
Good morning, Patty. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you with us this morning. It takes a lot of mental toughness, number one, to be the leader of our country. And I would imagine that from your perspective, it's even harder with the amount of opinions always out there, 24/7 media coverage, and people wanting to create their narrative to fit their agenda. What, from your perspective, can you share on what our president is going through?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, number one, the biggest problem right now is our nation is what I refer to as being drunk in emotion. I train lots of sales teams. I work with lots of salespeople, and I refer to it as getting drunk in emotion. It's basically where you're so overcome with emotion that you're incapable of thinking logically. So they're inversely related. As you get more emotional, you get less logical, and vice versa. So the problem with the nation right now is we're just so emotional. It's like we're hypersensitive that any little thing that happens, everybody responds in a very, very crazy way. And I mean, what happened last week's a prime example of that. Had he reacted with some sort of airstrike, everybody would have bashed him saying he did the wrong thing. But he decides not to. He decides to show some restraint, and all of a sudden he gets bashed because he didn't show enough aggression. So he's in a difficult position. That's part of the job. You know, he has to be able to compartmentalize, and he has to be able to separate emotions and do what he has to do. And I think what happened last week really did show that he is capable of regulating his emotions, which up until that point, I would have questioned how good he was at that.
Absolutely. And again, what happened to the old saying about, count to 10 or just wait a little while? It seems that there used to be a time in our culture where we buffered time to let the emotion settle, to sober up, to use your analogy, on the drunken emotion. But now with social media, we don't have that. Is that your perspective? Is that what's driving it, or is there more beyond social media that's causing this hypersensitivity?
You're spot on. It's just a total inability to hear an opposing point of view. And I refer to this also as suspending disbeliefs. Like, in a normal functioning society or in any relationship, you're able to suspend a disbelief. So if you say something that I disagree with, I'm able to look at that logically and say, okay, Patty disagrees with me. I'm going to hear her out. I'm going to suspend my disbelief. What I believe, I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to hear her out and analyze it. I might still disagree with you after you give me your point of view. But the problem is there's absolutely zero tolerance right now. It's the minute any fact disproves something that someone believes, they automatically just default to this defense mechanism where it's just belittling. It's talking down to people. There's no tolerance.
And yet those who are doing this are not very tolerant of hearing feedback. So when you travel around and you talk about mental toughness and emotional intelligence, who is your audience?
Yeah, I mainly work with sales teams. I mainly work with anybody who's in sales. It just so happens that the majority of salespeople are very delusional. Yeah. So that's a great market for me. But, mental toughness in the simplest terms is just emotional control. And as humans, we're horrible controlling emotions. So the whole political environment we're in right now, I mean, again, we're just insanely drunk in emotion where there's just nobody, there's two opposite sides, there's no middle, and that's a major problem right now. But you hit the nail straight on the head, though, which is we're not able to sit back and actually take a breath and think logically. And that's a major problem, especially in the political environment.
How do you think President Trump is doing over the last 2 years? Have you seen his strength grow in this particular area?
Well, it's funny you say that, Patty, because for the longest time, because I never really took my mental toughness topic into politics because it was just so, so polarized. I didn't really want to do that. But the more I started to read and learn, and I started to see, I really need to apply the mental toughness to what's happening. And with Trump, the crazy thing about him is, it's like he has some things that I would say from a mental toughness standpoint he's very strong in, like his determination to win. That's a mental toughness strength. never bowing to criticism. That's another big strength. Extreme confidence. And these are all things that mentally tough people have. But then when it comes to weaknesses, up until what happened last week, I would say his inability to regulate emotions. I mean, that's a mental toughness. That's 101. You have to be able to control and regulate your emotions. And I don't think he had been real good at that. You could see, look at his Twitter feed. I mean, unfortunately, he's just wide open. But after last week, I would say he definitely didn't improve in that category, which is the ability to regulate his emotions.
Well, they say once you say something, it's like ringing a bell. You can't unring it. And Twitter just is almost like that emotional response, which only gets other people hyped up and triggers their emotional response. And after a while, you wonder, what is this doing? Is there any redeeming quality going on here?
Well, you take what happened last week. I was in the Marine Corps, I was in the military, so you take what happened last week. Attacks get called off. Things change. People change minds, whatever. If he hadn't gone out to Twitter and broadcast everything, I called it off, I didn't want to do this, I didn't want to do that, this isn't an issue. I mean, there's going to be an action. There's going to be some type of action. I personally believe what has to happen is he needs to go to Congress, and there needs to be a consensus so everybody can kind of use this as like a team building thing to where everybody can agree this is what we need to do, because there is action that needs to be taken. But the good thing is he was able to step back and not allow his emotions to get the best of him. And that's a huge plus for everybody.
And, of course, we're also seeing this as it relates to immigration with calling off the ICE raids, apparently because of a conversation that he'd had with Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, and that's a whole other thing. I mean, look at that. I mean, nobody wants to look at the facts in that. It's just all emotion based. It's babies are laying on floors, babies are put in cages. It's like, come on, seriously? So you're saying that every single person who works on the border is a horrible individual who abuses children? Again, it's just the emotion overcoming the logic, and it's a problem in every piece of where we are as a nation right now. Everything goes back to the core of we're unable to control the emotion. That's where everything starts.
So if you had to give advice for all of us to toughen up mentally, what 3 points would you give us?
Well, number one, you have to be self-aware. So it's basically understanding your emotions. Self-awareness is a very big piece of it. It's understanding your positives, understanding your negatives, not being overly critical of what your negatives, but also not being overly positive to the good qualities. The regulation's a very big part of it. You have to be able to regulate the emotions. Then when you're regulating your emotions, it's not just yours, but also others. And the same thing with awareness. You have to be aware of your own strengths and weaknesses. But you also have to be aware of other people's, too. And that's the key to a good leader. A good leader just doesn't understand their own emotions. They're also good at understanding others. And that was a problem, again, I think, with someone like Donald Trump, who, unfortunately, he just, when it came to the emotional piece of it, he just wasn't good. He just wasn't good at that. He just, unfortunately, said what he wanted to say. He wasn't very empathetic. So, but yeah, the number one piece I would say is the emotional control piece. It's being able to step back and stand and look at where you are and say, okay, I'm not going to let feelings get in the way. You have to operate from what we call objective reality.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And read the room. I think there's a lot of things that we learn by doing, and our president is learning on a grand stage where we're watching the trial and error right before our eyes. But good stuff.
Be sure.
Yes.
It is. It's difficult, but that's why he gets paid the big bucks that he doesn't even take a check for. So
There you go. Eric Rittmeyer, thank you so very much for sharing your expertise with us, and thank you for your service as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Patty.
All right. Have a great day.
You too.